Welcome to the Get Your Act Together podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds. And if you have been around here for more than a minute, you will know that one of my favorite things to talk about is systems. Operations, and making sure that things run well. It has been our focus at Reynolds OBM for the last 6.5 years to help small businesses run their businesses better. And that is manifested in a couple different ways over the years. Things have changed. We started out, it was just me by myself as a virtual assistant, using kind of the Wall Street corporate skills that I had coming here and doing it for myself. And then moving on over the years, like through different iterations, being an OBM and a director of operations. And then all the way to the other end of the spectrum, I think, is like coaching other people on how to grow their small businesses, how to build their agencies. So there have been different ways that I've done things, but the message has been clear. I've been talking systems and operations the entire time because it's what I love. I mean, total ops nerd here. And throughout all of this time, you may have thought I was a broken record, that just talking over and over again about how good systems are essential to running your business well. And maybe over the last few years, you have been listening to me say this over and over again, drilling this into your head, and you have wondered if this is true. Like, is she right? Do you really need systems? Do you really need them to run your business better? And I will emphatically say, yes, you do. So I wanted to share two different stories today with you about how systems were completely crucial to a major life business change. These are examples of me and my clients working together to make their businesses run better. So first, we have the story of when my team member left. I have a team. They deal directly with my clients. They're client facing. And in this case, one person was handling one client. It was an old client of mine that I handed off to my team. They ran the account and they were leaving. Very nice. Like, they gave notice and prepared and all of that kind of stuff. But all of a sudden, this person that had been doing all this work up until now was leaving. And at this point, we were running very lean for a number of reasons, but there wasn't a lot of give in the system with anyone else. So I was going to just take on the work for a little while until I figured out like where I was going to rearrange things or how I was going to do it. It's a long story about why, but that was a decision I made on purpose, that I was going to take on this work. And it had been my client a long time ago. But what I can tell you is I had not done that work in a very long time. And I was actually really nervous that I was going to mess it up, because up until now, the person who was on my team, the VA, had been doing a fantastic job. And I didn't want to take over this client work, even if it was for the short term, and mess it all up, right? One, that's just embarrassing. But two, I also just don't want to give my client any bad service, right? I want to make sure everything was working for him. So she gave notice, and then there was like a due date, right? Like this will be my last day. And then the next day I was going to take over and she was going to be gone. And that was one of the first times where I was like brought to the mat. Okay, is this going to work? You've been preaching these systems for forever. Is this going to work? And I woke up that morning knowing full well that everything was documented. There's an SOP or a video or a dashboard or a link or this. Everything was organized. And it had been. It wasn't like a big cram. Like, she gave us, some notice and then she left. And but before she wasn't cramming all this stuff in, like, oh, I've got to make 1,000 videos before I leave. This had been going on this whole time, especially since this was right in the beginning of COVID. So we were extra vigilant that, God forbid, anybody got sick and was going to be, out for a couple of weeks. We needed to make sure that someone else could come in and pick it up. So I woke up that morning and I was super nervous in a nerd way because I totally could handle this. But at the same time, like, you just haven't done it in a while. You get nervous. And the systems were tested. The client needed a whole bunch of things, and I couldn't remember how to do any of it. So I had to go into the systems. I had to look at the SOPs. I had to look at the checklist, find the dashboard. What's the link to this? Where do we go from here? And it was all there. And it was like one of those things where I mean, I had been doing this work a long time ago. So most of it was a refresher. I had to go in and be like, okay, how do I do this again? What are all the steps? I don't want to forget anything. We go in there and I looked at the checklist or the SOP and I did the work. And he didn't notice any problems. There was no problems. It was a smooth, super smooth transition. So I had my systems tested the way that we had been creating them all along. They were tested really hard, really hard. And then that was it. They were great. Everything worked. So if I had not had those systems, one, I would have no idea what's going on. I would have panicked because I would want to know what's going on. So then I would have panicked that we had to prepare and I would have got a lockdown mode or something. But instead, we had been creating these systems all along. So there wasn't, 75 hours worth of work to do before a transition. There also wasn't God forbid it, this was a pleasant transition, right? She gave us notice and she moved on to great things. But what if instead she had gotten sick or had gotten into a car accident? There wouldn't have been that chance to have 75 hours worth of work to prep or cram in. You would have just had to do it today. So keeping those systems up all along that's when it's important, when you don't know you're going to need them. And I was super proud of us. I was super proud of us and the team to be able to have that kind of continuity without the client even noticing. So the second one is a little more complicated. If you guys have listened to episode 87, The Wrecking Ball, I told you the story about my biggest long-term client and about how they told me in May that they were selling their business. I thought I was going to have this really nice, easy summer. And right before Memorial Day, I got the notice hey, so your life's going to go into crazy, crazy overdrive for a couple months. Actually, I thought it was going to be 6 weeks. It was not. This is November and it's still not all the way calmed down. So they were selling their business and another company was coming in to buy them. And in that process, you have to go through due diligence, which is basically the other people asking a billion questions to see what's going on in the business, see what kind of things they're walking into, what kind of problems they may be having. And it is long lists of questions. There's an enormous amount of requirements. And we had 45 days due diligence to get them everything they needed to say, yes, we're going to buy this. Here's the money. So we had, I don't know how many systems tested. I was trying to think of this before I started to record this and trying to think of all the different systems we had tested, but it was just everything was tested. So when you go through that process, a lawyer sends over a list of questions and you answer that. And then there's another list and then there's a spreadsheet and then there's this. So they wanted everything. Policies. What's the PTO policy? There are about 100 employees in this company. What is the PTO policy? When do you pay payroll? All the little things, they had to ask every single question. They needed financials. We handled the HR and financial side of things, the operation side of it. We didn't do any of the hiring, but where all the files were, all the links to things. How do you do things? So we had to make copies of HR folders for everyone that's ever worked there. Everyone who's ever worked there. And they wanted specific things in there. So we couldn't just copy whatever we had. They only wanted specific things in those folders. Little things to be able to say, okay, we know where all that is. We can pull all that. Yeah, it's going to take us a ton of time to make a copy and put it in there and track it because we had to have tracking systems so that we knew what we made copies of and what we hadn't. And we created those instantly. My team was fantastic. They knew exactly how to do that and get it all done. Folders were made, copies, lots and lots of copies were made. The financials, the links to everything, all of the information that they wanted, we had. It took us a while to make a copy and make folders and hand it over and all that. But we knew where it all was. We knew how to get it all. We knew how to organize it all. And it was all ready, which super proud of because in that case, we had 45 days to give them everything. And if we hadn't been at least partly ready, if our folders hadn't been right, if our documentation hadn't been right, that would have been a pure disaster. Disaster. And then the second part of this is, well, now they bought the company. This was July. Now they want to transition, to taking it over. So that has been transitioning not only the employees over to the new company, but also transitioning us out. We are contractors there, and they are bringing everything in-house. So we've not only had to get a new email address and have a migration with Gmail, but also teach how to do everything we do and move it in-house. Where is everything? And that seems really easy until you get to questions of like, what day do you have to pay payroll? What day do you have to move money over? What day do you have to do this? What day do you have to process 401k so that the government doesn't yell at you? Because they do that. The government really likes 401k to be on a really specific schedule. So all of these things that we had to transition over, we already had a ton in place. We have dashboards. I've talked about this in the podcast before. This is a huge part of like what we do here. This operating system that we create in businesses is this dashboard, this hub with all of this information in it so that you can go there first and find out where everything is. There were SOPs, there were videos, there were tracking sheets, there were guidelines. There were all these things that when someone had a question about how whatever the 401k was run, I could send them a sheet that we had created with all the facts that they might need right on there. Now, we created that 3 years ago because I can never remember what the matching was on something. So a lot of these documents we created just for us to be able to run things better. But when someone else came in to buy the business, that information was already made. It was already there. It was already prepped. So when we want to train someone or we wanted to, transition us out of there, we could hand them this dashboard and say, here you go. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. Now, of course, they're going to want to know different things, or there may have been something that we didn't think we had to, teach anyone because it was an internal thing, but I guess we do. So we could make another video for it. But when you're there and you're making a video or a couple of SOPs, but everything else is created, it's just like adding on a little thing here or there. It is way easier because most of that has already been done. Most of it has already been taken care of. You're not having to start from scratch. And I will say, if you wanted to sell your business and you had to start from scratch, I have no idea how you would do it. Like if you had nothing written down and you're like, here, I want to sell my business. One, the new company, they don't want to take on a business that isn't documented because they don't want to buy what's in people's heads. They want to buy a business that's repeatable and runnable, even if those people leave. Even if the old people leave, they are still buying a business. They want to know how it runs. So having all of that information is super important. Okay. And starting from scratch when you think that you're going to need something, you're already behind. It takes forever. It can really take a long time, especially if you're doing it in-house when and if you have time, or if you have no system to create the systems, which is, really important. Where does it all live? All that kind of stuff. And it can take a while to get things actually just documented, collating, I don't know if that's a word anymore, but gathering all this information together, like not even just to sell your business. Like even if you just want to get out of the day-to-day running of your business so your ops person can do it. You've gotten to a place where you're like, oh, I hired an ops person and now I'd like them to help me. And I need that stuff out of my head so that they can help. Or you just want to go on vacation. You want to go on vacation for a week, maybe 2. And you do not want to get yelled at by your spouse once again for being your laptop and working the whole time. That could be it. Like maybe you don't want to sell your business ever. Maybe you just want to go on vacation. So having these systems in place having them already in place when you need them is going to be huge. And I know that the idea of this is overwhelming to a lot of people, especially at the burden on like the team's time. If you have a team trying to write out SOPs, it seems like, all right, we'll get to it. We'll get to it someday. But like I'm saying, these are the times where you're like, oh, someone quit, I have 2 weeks, or someone's gotten into a car accident, I have no time, or I want to sell my business and I need everything documented today. You need to get that started ahead of time. And it can really, it can be really hard, especially when your team is already stretched and you are trying to get all that kind of stuff done and you don't have the bandwidth to bog down the entire team, get all that stuff out of their head. But it is important to keep your business going when someone gets sick, when someone needs to leave, get out of the day-to-day chaos, or sell your business eventually. So if that seems like a lot, well, number one, totally is. Especially to people who are not ops nerds. Like, I love this. Like I have said before, I love writing SOPs. Like I'm that weird person who like gets excited to like make a whole pretty spreadsheet for it. But I know a lot of people out there are not weird like me, and they don't like that. So if this is a thing that you understand is a really important thing for your business, but you don't see the bandwidth or you just do not want to do it, then reach out to us. We can help you. Systems are totally our jam, and we can help without taking you out of your business, because you probably have really good things to do that are not writing SOPs. And I think your team probably does too. So we can help you without bogging down your team and taking all your time. So if that's the thing you need, reach out to us. Go to reynoldsobm.com, schedule a call. And yeah, you need systems. Trust me. We've been tested. These are just 2 examples of being tested with systems, but I thought they were good examples of clear things that all of a sudden you need everything done, and yeah, be good to have them done. So, all right, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you have an agency or want to create one, come join my Facebook community, Get Your Agency Together, where we talk all the things growing and scaling your agency. For show notes and more info on all the things, head over to reynoldsobm.com. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook at ReynoldsOBM. And finally, if you enjoy this podcast, I would love for you to give us a review on iTunes.